So today, our topic is giving yourself a break. Giving yourself a break. And I was actually quite specific in the title. I didn't say give yourself a break, because that's like a one-time thing, right? It's like, hey, give yourself a break. And you're like, oh yeah, things have been rough. Let me take this one moment and give myself a break. But rather, this is an active word, giving yourself a break. That it should be something that's part of your habit, part of the way that you do things in life, the balance of everything, right? That it's not just when everything is too extreme that maybe you give yourself permission to rest for a moment, but that you plan that rest in every moment so that there is that balance. This is what the topic really is about today, is giving yourself a break and really trying to see what does that mean for each of you. I find I've lived here in Bali for probably about 17 years now. And I see people come through all the time, and many of them are looking for themselves, looking through these transitions and these new places and phases they are in their life. And the one thing that people seem to be the most terrified of is actually pausing, taking a moment, giving themselves the time to find the clarity for that next step. It's like they get here and they're like, okay, I got to figure it out. I got to go to that and to that, and maybe Rodolfo's going to tell me, or maybe that yoga class, or maybe this, circle and shamanic thing. I don't know what it is, but something's going to tell me what my next step is, and then I got to go. It's interesting. People will come here with like corporate burnout, and they've been like way too yang energy, like active, go, go, go. And they're like, I came to Bali to rest. Cool. What are you doing? 20 classes a day. Okay. So it's not about what you're doing, it's about how you're doing it. And this is the key, I think, to giving yourself a break. What is the motivation behind your activity, your action? Even those two words we can discern, right? Action is something that we take intentionally and we move forward with. Activity tends to be a busyness. We're just keeping going and busy and then going and going and going, instead of pausing, taking a moment to see what might enter into that space. Because if you've been so busy in the same patterns and habits of your life, and those are the same patterns and habits that have created the results that you're not happy with, or maybe you're just ready to move on from, and you haven't looked to see what's the motivation that created those things, then you're probably going to do it again. You're just going to find a different way of doing it. Like the example I just shared. You come here, you do a bunch of different things. It's almost like there's a sense in our psychology that feels guilty, feels bad if you just sat and did nothing. How many of you sometimes have that thought in your mind? You wake up, you're like, today I just want to lay in bed. I don't want to get up. I don't want to go do anything. I just want to sit here and relax. How long does it last? The voice probably continues to shout in the background, but you probably get up, you're like, no, I have to do this and this and this. Probably because you have certain responsibilities, right? And the funny thing about that word by itself, responsibility, I think we misunderstand it a lot of times. By the way, as I go, I just start to pick things up and I'm just going to kind of go. If you guys have any questions or comments, just raise your hands, okay? Cool. Responsibility, this is one that I think we often misunderstand. We think of it like you even hear the word and there's a little cringe, right? A little contraction in the body. It's like, ooh. Because I think we look at responsibility as a duty that must be fulfilled, that we are obligated to, expected of, but maybe that we never chose. That we didn't consciously say, hey, I want to do that. Half the time it's because there's something else that we want and we think we have to do this thing to get there. So I'd like to change the word for you a little bit. Same word, but look at it differently. Responsibility, break it up, ability to respond. Not about fulfilling some obligation or expectation, but about seeing your own capacity, your ability to respond in any moment. And that might also be that as you're waking up and the response to a guidance of your own body that says, hey, I want to rest right now. The proper response would be, okay. Now we do have to start to have a discernment there, because sometimes that voice isn't really the voice of our intuition, but it's the voice of our fatigue, the voice of our avoidance, the voice of our exhaustion. It's the thinking mind reflecting on something instead of the body sensation giving guidance of something. So probably the very first step, we have to step back a little bit before we can even look and try to discern what those voices are in our heads, which, do we all have a lot of them? I know I do. Right? is to see if we are, again, motivated by something pushing us or something pulling us. I think when we're pulled, that's more of an inspiration. When we're pushed, that's a motivation. And most of the time, from my experience in my own life and also what I've seen in countless classes like this and students and clients, is that our motivations are almost always triggered or moved by avoidance. We're trying to avoid something of the past. And sometimes it's not something bad, but it's that we're avoiding losing something that we've enjoyed, right? But it's avoidance. It's not actually moving towards something. It's trying to move away from something. Check in with yourself on that concept. Sometimes I'll ask, actually almost every time, whenever I work with a client one-on-one, the very first question I ask is, what do you want? Seems like a simple question, right? Easy question. What do you want? But it's a little bit of a trick question because the mind hasn't really ever been asked that. It's rare that we really sincerely, consciously, while taking a pause, the time to reflect, ask, what do I want? Normally our mind immediately translates that, what do I need? And needs, different than wants, needs are based on survival. The only time it is a need is when not doing it will cause you to die. Right? Middle of the road, semi-truck is coming at you, you need to move. But if you're sitting in a room and you got a question and that question's burning inside you and you're like, oh, I want to ask this, but I maybe not because I need to make sure people don't think that I'm weird if I ask this question. That's not a need. That's an avoidance. Do you see it? And so this is normally what people answer when I ask them, what do you want? They go, well, I don't want to suffer anymore, and I don't want heartbreak, all that last relationship, and I don't want to be poor, and I don't want to be sick, and I don't want this. I go, whoa. Those are what you don't want. That's what you're avoiding. What do you want? And they look at me like they didn't understand the words. And after a few moments, most people, they'll respond with the same thing. It's so interesting to me. They'll be like, I don't know. And I always think, BS, belief system. You do know what you want. I think every single one of us knows what we want. Otherwise, why are we disappointed when we don't get it? Right? Chocolate cake walks in the room, you're like, I know what I want. Gets real clear. I think the problem isn't not knowing what you want, but rather not realizing you have permission to have it. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really, really important. The problem isn't not knowing what you want. It's not realizing you have permission to have it. You have permission to have it. And the same word of permission is what I bring to this idea of taking a break. You have permission to have it. Because you'll notice when you're not taking a break, even when that whisper of that voice comes up and it's like, hey, we just got to rest. Like, can we take a day, an hour, 10 minutes, please? And you're like, no, I can't. We need to. Back to survival. But it's not actually survival. It's something that you're fighting against with your wants, your desires. And most of the time, instead of moving towards what you really want, you're trying to run away from what you don't. If the excuse in your mind in that morning is like, no, I need to do this because I have to do it for work. And if I don't do that from work, I won't have the money to pay my bills. I don't have the money to pay my bills. I'll starve to death. Always goes back to survival. But what if instead you flipped it and you said, okay, right now I'm alive. Good recognition to have. I'm laying in a bed inside of a house where I just got up at the time that I chose to in Bali, Indonesia, and even came curiously to a heart talk. Your needs are met currently. Your survival needs are met in this moment. So then instead of trying to figure out what do I need, what do you want? And could you give yourself permission? And the only way that you're going to give enough space for the clarity of that permission to come up or the clarity of what you actually want is if you take a pause. If you take a break. Because when you're going, you're missing things, right? You're too focused on getting somewhere instead of being on the path. How many of you are guilty of this thought? Yeah, but when I get there, then I can rest. Right? When I get there, then I can be happy, then I can rest, then I can enjoy life. This is the old paradigm model of retirement, right? Work, and then when you're like 50, 60 years old and you're super stressed and exhausted, you've not done anything to bring joy and fuel into your life and inspiration, you're like, okay, no, I'm too tired to do anything else now. Don't wait to give yourself rest. Give yourself rest along the way. Imagine it like a stairwell. Maybe some of the stairwells here, actually, they're huge. Right? If you go up to Champuan, up near Peniston and some other places, there's these long stairwells. You can't, even here, you go around the corner. There's these long stairwells. You don't know exactly when it ends. And there's probably a mindset that's like, okay, I'm going to go up as fast as I can so I can get to the top. When I get to the top, then I can rest. And there's almost a guilt that says, if I stop halfway, I'm being lazy. If I stop halfway, I'm stalling. But what if you did it intentionally? Because I can tell you half the time that I've gone up these steps here, when I've met some of the most beautiful, amazing, interesting people, it's because I stopped. If I had just been running along the way, which I've seen people, and then they slip, it's dangerous. Don't run on the steps of life. Yeah.
One thing I noticed about the local people here is they all walk like really slow.
Yeah.
Not just up general.
Yeah.
You never see anyone rushing. And they're always...
Yeah. There's a presence to the Balinese culture, right? But it's a presence that we can all embody. The only reason that we're not is because we're rushing to get to a destination because we think that the destination is the thing that we want. We're looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow instead of enjoying the rainbow. So what happens when we take a pause is that we step back and we get the bigger perspective. We start to see the things that we didn't see before. And in seeing those things, we might find some clarity about what we really want in life. How many of you are riding a motorbike while you're here? Some of you, right? Even if you're in a car, although with the traffic you're not really going that fast, but in a motorbike, if you're going along, you're not seeing all the things that are here. But when you're walking, especially if you do it at the pace that he was just talking about, where you're walking slowly. My wife tricked me into window shopping the other day. And I call it a trick because she said, we're going to window shop. I'm like, great. We'll walk by the windows. Be like, that's nice. That's nice. That's not what it means. She went inside. I was like, what are you doing? But how beautiful to be able to take the time to do that. On the motorbike, you can't. You don't even see what's in the windows. Whenever we do actually walk around town, I often make the comment like, hey, look at that new place. She's like, that's been there for 3 years. Taking a break, giving yourself a break, doesn't mean that you have to stop, full stop. It means simply slow down a little bit. Give yourself enough time to integrate and process what's moving through your life. And that's what I was coming to with this idea of don't run down or up the steps. It's dangerous because not only might you slip, but you miss everything that's along the way. And I think that's a more dangerous thing in life is to miss all the opportunities that have been presented to you because you just weren't slowing down enough to see them. There's a great sermon that Gautama Sakyas, is the original Buddha, that he gave, and it was called the Flower Sermon. And what he did was, he was already fairly popular back in his time, and he'd been asked to come give a talk. So thousands of people had gathered to hear the wise words of Gautama Sakyas, the Buddha. And they built this big stage for him, and it was all set up, and all these people were crowded. And as he's coming towards the stage, he's walking like a Balinese person, just like slow, contemplative. And he notices on the steps up the stage, this little flower blossom that had begun to grow. And he knelt down, and he picked the flower blossom, and he went up on stage with it, and he just stood in front of everybody, very gently, just twirling it and twirling it. Not saying a word, just quiet, twirling it. And at first the audience was like, oh, yeah, so deep. And then after like 10 minutes, they're like, 20, 30 minutes, they're like, I don't know what he's. And then he handed it to one person who was smiling in the front row, and then he walked off stage. That was it. Most popular sermon he ever gave, the Flower Sermon. And the reason being because he slowed down enough to experience the moment. See, had he been thinking about the expectations, we come back to this idea of responsibility, right? The expectations of everybody in that audience, and had been rushing up there and trying to make sure, okay, do I have all my notes in my head? I'm going to talk to him about the Four Noble Truths and then the suffering. No, he wasn't doing that. He was in his present moment, seeing what was around him. He was also not in the past being reflective. If he had done that, he would have seen the flower blossom and been like, yeah, I've seen those before. No biggie. But rather, he was so present that it was like as if it was the first time seeing this possibility of beauty in the moment. And he picked it and he went up and he just sat there enjoying it. Because he wasn't in a rush to get somewhere. He was there. I'm going to say that again. He wasn't in a rush to get somewhere. He was already there. And that's a possibility for all of us. We can all just be standing with the flower blossom, seeing life as it is in this moment. And there's going to be not just the beauty of the flower blossom, right? If you go and you pick any flower out there right now, you're going to notice that it's not perfect. It's not perfect. We have this visual in our mind, right, of like this like beautiful, every petal's immaculate and gorgeous and like all this. No, that's not how it is. There's going to be little burn marks from the sun. There's going to be little bits that were eaten by a caterpillar. But to be present to all of it. Because unless you're present to both the bad, or the things that you might not like, you can't be present to the other. Because you're in such a rush to run away, avoid the other things, that you miss all the good things. So again, I invite you, give yourself a break. Start giving yourself a break, that in every moment you're not rushing, but you're walking. Taking the moment to really notice, to see, to experience and feel what's around you. This, by the way, I call acceptance. That's another one of those words I think we're often misconstruing in life. Acceptance. A lot of times people look at the word acceptance and it's like, if you're in a conscious community and something's not going so well in your life and you go and you talk to a friend and they're also very conscious and you share this suffering that you're going through and they're like, yeah, it sucks and here's the thing, you just got to accept it. And you're like, what? What? That's not good advice. Because what they mean to say when they're using acceptance like that is you have to tolerate it. Because that's where we're misunderstanding acceptance. We're using the word in place of a tolerance. You see, when you just think, oh, I just have to again, need, expectation, obligation. It's an avoidance. I have to accept it. That's you tolerating it with the hope that it might just go away. How well is your endurance? So I'd like to redefine acceptance today. Instead of tolerating, what if acceptance was simply recognizing the moment for what it is? You don't have to like it. You don't have to not like it. And you don't have to stay in that situation or quality of situation. But you have to recognize where you're starting from. Does that make sense? You have to recognize the truth of this moment right now. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going to step from. Now imagine if you weren't sure of where you were standing and all you knew was where you wanted to go. That means that where you're standing is kind of constantly falling away and you're not sure what to do. What are you going to do? You're going to rush. You're going to hurry and be in haste. And this again is why we're rushing through life, trying to get there instead of be here. All right, everything in moderation, that's how we can look at life, is can we balance it out? Because even when somebody's running a marathon, there's going to be moments where they might sprint, maybe on those straightaways, they're like, and then on the curves, they're like, take your time then. You don't want to skid out. And that's the same in life. There will be moments where it's okay to go a little faster. But not to make that the norm. Because again, you need to check in to see why. Why are you being motivated to go faster? I've been speaking about this idea that we're often looking for the destination. We're trying to get there as fast as possible. And it's not because so much of what we think is there. Because we've already kind of talked about this. We're not actually moving towards what we desire. Most of the time, we're running from what we don't want. From what we're avoiding. And if you imagine that what you're avoiding is chasing you, well, of course, it's very difficult to take a break. It's like if some, animal was chasing after you, and you're like, okay, hold on. No, you stop there, hold on. Let me just get a breath. Okay, we can go again, right? This doesn't work. But that animal, most of the time, doesn't exist. It's the story of your mind. It's the story that you're telling yourself about what might happen if you don't rest, if you don't take a break, if you give yourself this moment. It's all those conditions that we have created. So I invite you to an experiment. Here's the thing. Your mind, your psyche, the way that it's working is it's going, okay, we've been doing things a certain way all of our life. You're still alive. Let's not change anything. But it doesn't mean that you've been living your life. It just means that you were surviving. And so the experiment that I invite you to is change something. Small. Not too big. Change something small. Maybe it's the side of the bed you get out of. Maybe it's which hand you use to brush your teeth. Maybe it's the route you take to wherever you're going. Maybe it's the way that you greet somebody. Instead of shaking a hand, you might give a hug. Or if you're always hugging, you might shake a hand. Just change something small. Because what it's going to do is let your brain know that you didn't die. That you changing something didn't cause you to die. This is big. Because then the brain, especially the survival part, this little amygdala in the back here, it starts to calm down. Because it's been running the show for so many of us. And when it starts to calm down, your energy and your consciousness comes a little bit more into the frontal cortex of imagination and problem solving and creative thinking. And all of a sudden, new possibilities you weren't seeing before are possible because you're not running for your life. Your mind starts to realize you're not in danger. This is one of the first questions actually I ask clients outside of what do you want is, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe? And it's not a question just of the physicality, but actually mentally and emotionally, are you feeling safe? Because I think most of the time, a lot of us are not. The reason we get anxiety, we get stressed, we're constantly going, is we're not actually feeling safe at a fundamental level. And we go back again to this needs versus wants. If you feel you need to do certain things in order to belong, in order to sustain, in order to survive, you're not going to feel safe. But when you realize that in this moment, again, the example that you're sitting in a room right now listening to a talk for an hour, it says that you're probably safe at a base level. Now, emotionally, maybe there's more that needs to be done there. And that's where you get to give yourself permission to express. To find the safety of containers where you can do that. Places like this, or with a good friend or a professional, whoever it might be, however it might be, journaling, whatever you want to do, to give yourself the permission to express. And then we have the mental safety, and that one's the trickiest one because it's about identity. So often people are afraid of losing an identity that they may not even want. Isn't that interesting? So often we are fighting for things like when people come and they're in the victim role, and if, let's say they come in for coaching and they're like, how can I get rid of this? Well, have you tried? No, I don't want to do that, this and that. And they'll start fighting. I'm like, what are you fighting for? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you're fighting for the identity of how things have been. But I've always suffered this and that. Yeah, but that's not how you have to be. But I always have. So what? But you see, they've identified with it. And in the identity, they forgot that there was other possibilities. You know how they can find out these other possibilities? Give themselves a break. Take a moment. Pause. Slow down. To start to realize that there's other ways in which they might live and be in the world.
How would you define consequences?
Good question. How would I define consequences? I would say consequences are whatever result happens from taking a step forward. Good or bad, right? So a consequence is simply the result of taking action. That's a consequence. It's a result of taking action. But notice, we automatically, when we hear the word consequences, it's similar to responsibility. We have a negative connotation to it. Like, ooh, the consequences. Yeah, I want to avoid those. So you want to avoid the good ones too? And the only way you can find out what it is going to be as a result is to take the step. Right? To at least take a moment towards it. I call this saying yes to the possibility. Right? You don't always have to say yes to the thing, but say yes to the possibility of the thing. This is really, really important. Right? So often we are not saying yes to the possibility because we're stuck in a mentality that says, yeah, but I don't even deserve it. I want it, but I don't deserve it. How many of you have had that thought in your mind before? That you're not worthy of it. In these consequences, it means that it's going to affect and influence the trajectory of how you continue forward, right? Now, if you stay focused on what you want, no matter what, you stepping forward is going to move you in that direction. Right? That's called progress. But what most of us will do is we'll be at that fork in the road and it'll be like, okay, go to the heart talk or finish the report for work. Go to the heart talk or finish the report for work. And the mind is going, you've got to finish that report. If you don't, they're already like pissed at you that you're in Bali and they're not. Like, you got to finish that or you're going to lose your position and then eventually your job and die, right? Somewhere down the line. Or, this is what you do. There's two things, communicate and prioritize. Prioritize means that you don't say, I'm going to go into the heart talk and screw the report, I'm never doing it. No, you prioritize. You say, I'm going to go to the heart talk now, and then I'll do the report when I get back. See, we make these absolutes out of every choice that we make in life, as if it's like it's this or that. No, it's just this now and that maybe later, if needed. But you prioritize it in the sense of find out what you need in order to feel the energy to do the things that you must do. Because too often we're trying to force ourselves to do the thing that we don't want to do with an empty cup, and then we don't do it very well, and the same effect happens because you're also still focused on, I have to do this, and if I don't, then this is going to happen, which means you're kind of drawing yourself towards that result, that consequence. Or, if you came in with the desire and the focus and the clarity, said, I'm going to do this so that I have the energy and the joy to do that if I need to still do it, and I'm going to keep moving forward towards the things I really want in life. Prioritization, communication. This is where you call your boss up, you're like, hey, I'm going to be about an hour late on that report. Right? Sometimes if we don't communicate, the consequences are worse, right? So always communicate, but communicate what you want, right? What you need, and give choice. So if your boss says like, no, you need to do this, we need it because of this and this. Okay, now you've been prioritized differently. But communicate to find out. That's the yes to the possibility, right? You get the clarity by taking a step. A lot of times what we try to do is we try to take the choice and hope that nobody notices, right? And it's both on the choices where we think that we're being selfish and also the choices where we're kind of going towards something that we're afraid of, that we're not sure we can achieve, and we don't want anybody to notice in case we don't, right? It's a fail-safe to be like, just in case this doesn't work out, nobody knows I even tried. But because you didn't let anybody know, nobody supported you. Communication. It's key. And it allows us to be supported. It allows us to move without too many consequences or friction because there's been clarity. When you have clarity, it's much easier to walk along a path. How many of you would say that you're a little bit unclear about what your future holds, where you're going in your future? Anybody trying to figure that out right now? Right? I'm going to give you a visual as to why I think this happens for a lot of people. All right. So we have our future. It's over here. We have our present moment. It's right here. And then we have our past. Which one is the most familiar? Exactly. The past is the most familiar, and so this is what people are doing. It's familiar, it's comfortable, they know what to expect, they know what to avoid, they're watching it over here, and they're moving into their future like this. Right? Tiptoeing, trying to see, and they're like, I just don't know what's there. Yeah, turn around. It's real easy. There's a move. You can do it. It's like this. It's like a Michael Jackson move. You just go, hee hee. Right? You just turn around towards your future, towards where the direction you want to move in. This is why I say so often we are focused on what we're avoiding and we're running without knowing where we're going. That's so dangerous. Worse than running up the steps and down. Turn towards the direction that you were headed. And by the way, it's always forward. But we're stuck over here, and it takes quite a bit of trust and confidence and courage to make that whole transition, right? Most people, they get only halfway. They're like, hee-haw! They get stuck right here in the present moment. And you want to know why? Because right here, it's unknown. Over there, you have a projected future that you might want. Over there, you've got the familiarity of what you have had. Here, unknown. They often say that fear is of the unknown. I think fear is actually of the unknown that we think we know. The unknown that we think we know. I'm going to explain that. It's a fun tongue twister. If you're afraid of something, are you like, yeah, I have no idea what it is and I don't know what to expect and I'm just afraid? No, then you're curious. Many of you mentioned it today, right? But when you say, but what if it's this or what if it's that? And you project a known into the unknown, now you create fear. So instead of doing that, which is what happens here in this place of the unknown, if instead of being afraid of not knowing and then projecting something, which will always be based on the consequences of the past, instead of that, be curious and embrace 3 words, the 3 most powerful words right after, I love you. And they are, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. They're so powerful, and the reason being because when you embrace I don't know, you can find out. As long as you're rejecting it, denying it, avoiding it, you're not finding out. You're just projecting more fears, building them up, creating more of a mountain to run away from and be in this running haste that you never take a break and you never get to see the opportunities and possibilities that are there and the new choices that you could take. So giving yourself a break, intentionally slow down, intentionally pause at that junction in between the past and the future and see where you're at with acceptance. To notice the possibilities that are there, because when you do, then you can choose the direction of your life and the places you want to go and the destination you move in a direction towards. And as soon as you know that you're facing the right way, you can let go of the destination, because that's not where the happiness lies. It's in knowing with clarity that you're stepping towards it. No matter what, when you change something, there is always going to be friction, right? That's what's called a growth pain, growing pains, right? And you're going to have your own frictions, your own turmoil and conflict in your mind. Should I, shouldn't I? Is it okay for me to do it? And then maybe you have the courage to do that. And you're like, I'm doing it. And then everybody around you is like, what? Grab your legs. You're like, go, come on, just. But your example is perfect, because you said after almost 2 years, your job actually was like, hey, look, whenever you're ready to come back, like we're here, because we didn't change. So when you come back, if you come back, we're ready. See, human beings have this amazing ability to adapt. But we will make up so much ruckus and noise in the moment of change. And then give it like a day or two, and then it's like, okay. Right? So we have to have enough courage and enough confidence and enough energy to take more than just that first step, because there is going to be somebody holding on to your back leg. And you got to take that next step. And that next step. And you want to know what actually gives you the power and the confidence to do that? That you're not looking back at them and being like, no, I'm sorry, I have to leave you for a moment. It's never going to work. You're going to walk back. Which way are you facing? Because if you're facing in the direction that you wish to go, then whatever might hold you back is not in your perspective. Right? You can consider it, but it's not your priority. You're moving forward. Now, it doesn't mean that you're moving forward and forgetting them. This is a big piece, because I think a lot of times, and I see this so often actually for people that come here and they have these big transformative processes and big change. They get really worried as they're getting ready to go home. And they start thinking, how am I supposed to fit back in? Like, I'm not the same anymore. Maybe it's that you stopped drinking or smoking or something like this, and you're like, that's how I related with people. How am I supposed to go back and do that? They're going to think I'm judging them. They're going to not want to hang out with me. I'm going to lose my friends. Two things. One, you might. And that's okay. That's growth, right? As you grow out of certain things and into other things. That's really important to note. You grow out of certain things and into other things. When you realize you're always growing into something, you're not too afraid. The fear comes when you think that you're going to be leaving behind something and then left with nothing. But you're growing towards other things, and that might be new job opportunities, new possibilities in the circles and communities that you have, these kind of things, right? The other role that you get to play in going boldly towards what you want in life is you've given yourself permission, and permission is contagious. When you give yourself permission, you inspire others to see the possibility. So those same people who might make a lot of noise because they're afraid, right? They want the best for you, or they're afraid for something for themselves, and they're like, no, what are you doing? You're changing things. But either they're going to adapt to function without your role, or they're going to be inspired by it and move towards the things that they want. And it won't be everybody, right? Not everybody's going to be ready to move towards the things that they want. Notice I'm not saying to move towards what you showed them, but move towards what they want. Permission is contagious in the sense that it gives us individually the permission to follow our own heart. But again, to do that, we have to pause long enough to notice whether we are in this moment or not. If we are moving with our heart, if we are fulfilling what we really want in life, or are we just running the game and the race? And the question is, well, how can I change the environment around me, the people around me, so that I'm not fighting against it? You can't. Right? We cannot change others. We can set an example. We can be an inspiration. We cannot force change. Right? If you try to, you'll spend all your energy doing that, and you'll end up with them instead of in the change that you've created. What you can do is ask two things. One, you can go back and you can be you within that same role, right? However that might work. If it works and if it doesn't, If it doesn't, that's where the second question comes in, and that's where we come back to identity. Is the person that you were then, within that role, in that company or that industry or whatever it is, the person you want to be? Is it the person you want to continue being? When you ask yourself that, now you can see, is this an identity I'm holding on to and trying and fighting for that actually I don't want? And it might be something similar, but differently. Great. Start to cultivate the difference. So again, the answer would be go back into it, but small steps, right? The smaller the steps that we take, the easier it is to function through change. We're often trying to make these big leaps. And in those big leaps, it's more likely because you're running away from something. If you're with the eye on the ball towards what you're going towards, slowly, you can take small steps and progress in a way that allows people to evolve with you. And again, this means that you bring your focus towards you. Not towards others, not towards how can I change them, but how can I change how I'm responding to that environment. I love it at ecstatic dance, if any of you have tried that out. Sometimes the music really starts getting pumping. And occasionally it's a little overwhelming for me, and so I slow down and I go into slow motion mode. It's so fun. Everybody else is and you just see this guy walking through like, you can imagine you're like a superhero, right? Yeah. You've seen me do that? What happens is it doesn't matter how quickly the environment around you is moving. You set your own pace. You have to have the courage to do it, though. The biggest question I would have you ask yourself and anybody here is, what do I want? Is it the job you want? Is it the money you want? Is it that environment and community that you want? Or is there something else, right? And if there's something else that can even be within that same structure, wonderful, start to cultivate it. Bring your energy and your focus there instead of on how can I avoid losing what I have. Instead, how can I cultivate what I want? And again, it will require first slowing down, taking that time. And you're already doing it. You're here in Bali. It's taking some time, right? So I'm going to quickly summarize everything we've been talking about. We're at the hour. We've been talking today about giving yourself a break. And giving yourself a break is an active term. It's do it not just as a moment of relief because you're overwhelmed, but rather do it intentionally so that there's this balance in your life. That in intentionally slowing down, taking pauses, maybe even sometimes stopping at the fork in the road, you can look at not just the two choices that might be there, but the infinite number of possibilities. Because when you slow down, you start to see the variety. And in that variety, you started to go and look with clarity to say, which one do I want to move towards? What do I want to cultivate in my life? And you start to step towards it. You don't have to leap or run because there's no rush anymore. You're not trying to avoid something. You're moving towards something. And in that, you can take step by step as if you were moving along the rainbow instead of towards the gold. You're just enjoying the colors of life. And in this way, this is how we give ourselves a break. Not just as something that's lazy, but rather as something that in that moment is when you integrate the most. And I'll leave you with one little statistic that you may not know. It's in the moments of rest that we grow the most. It's not in the constant going, because your body doesn't have time. But it's in that hour, day, or week that you take a moment that suddenly all the insights, thoughts, mindsets, things you've been trying to integrate, the physicality, if you've been working out and things like that, it all happens when you rest, not when you're active. So give yourself a little break. Thank you.